Thanks, Anita, and thank you very much for coming on this hot Sunday afternoon. So it's a great honour for me to be here to share some of my thoughts in relation to this exhibition, with special focus on the notion of the sublime in music. Today I will provide some examples of how various music cultures aspire to experience transcendence and the divine. What's amazing is that we don't often have to travel very far to experience how the sublime in music might work. Something interesting might be happening in your very own neighbourhood this afternoon. The examples I've chosen comes from my fieldwork over some 12 years in Australia and around the world. In the e-blast I proposed this question: what draws people to move beyond the day to day, and how have they attempted to achieve this? The aim of this talk is not so much to provide a definitive answer to this question, but to explore the role that the sublime plays in the contemporary arts and life of performers and listeners from diverse musical contexts. I'm going to play you a bit of my work now, and hopefully you can remember the tune because you might hear it again later. I just have to stop it there. I'm not sure if I need to talk about what music is. I'm sure you all know what music is. But let's begin with a bit of a quote from that very famous composer Beethoven, Ludwig van Beethoven, in his very messy studio there. And Beethoven wrote that music is the mediator between the spiritual and sensual life. Although the spirit be not master of that which is created through music, yet it is blessed in this creation, which, like every creation of art, is mightier than the artist. Frank Fitzpatrick, multi-platinum record producer, songwriter, entrepreneur and award-winning filmmaker, is very much into music and spirituality. And he was an Irish Catholic who became very interested in the spirituality of India. And people have often asked him, what kind of music is more spiritual? Is it the Vedic mantras, Gregorian chants, devotional bhajans, the great symphonies of Beethoven, traditional gospel hymns, indigenous drums, or even rock and roll? And I tend to agree with Fitzpatrick's opinion that any of this can be spiritual. Any music that helps to reconnect us with our essence, to our inner and divine nature, is spiritual. But how can we define spirituality? Many scholars have taken to coming up with a definition in their related disciplines. So I'll share some of them with you now, in brief. Reid believes that spirituality is defined in terms of personal views and behaviors that express a sense of relatedness to a transcendent dimension or to something greater than the self. Meanwhile, Kuhn writes that spiritual elements are those capacities that enable a human being to rise above or transcend any experience at hand. And they are characterized by the capacity to seek meaning and purpose. And in terms of meaning and purpose, spirituality often plays a big role in the lives of end-of-life patients and their families, where there may be pain, emotional suffering, loss of existential reasoning, and loss of control. And I know this from having worked with palliative care workers myself, looking at music and healing in that aspect. Highfield believes that the spiritual dimensions of persons can be uniquely defined as the human capacity to transcend self, which is phenomenologically related in three basic spiritual needs: the need for self-acceptance, the need for relationship with others and or a supreme being, example God, the need for hope, which is to imagine and participate in the enhancement of a positive future. And he believes that all persons experience these spiritual needs, whether or not they're part of a religious organization. There is another opinion that the spiritual pertains to the innate capacity and tendency to seek or transcends one's current locus of centricity, which transcendence involves increased knowledge and love. And finally, according to Lapierre, 6 clear factors appear to be fundamental aspects of spirituality: those of the journey, transcendence, community, religion, the mystery of creation, and transformation. It might seem like a coincidence, but each description above mentions the word transcendence, and often there's the innate human capacity for transformation. So it's something that these scholars believe we can all do and achieve. So transcendence, achieving altered states of mind, transformation, trance, healing. The power of music on the human mind, emotions, and body is a recognized fact in many cultures, and a topic that has been well researched in recent decades. Rhoda Bernard from Boston Conservatory has studied the relationship between flow, transcendent music making experiences, transcendent religious experiences, and music education. And this was done by studying her graduate students' autobiographical accounts of their experiences in making music. And a pattern emerged from this study. Many of the texts describe transcendent experiences. Transcendent music making experiences are distinguished by 2 main qualities: that the performer is functioning at the height of his or her abilities, and that the performer has a sense of being a part of something larger than him or herself in some way. And this concept's very interesting for music educators too. In 2014, a great symposium took place on this topic. It was entitled Music, Transcendence and Spirituality, the 2014 Symposium on Music and the Brain. And many scholars gathered to ask this question: what are the neural correlates of transcendence? What role does culture play? William Beeman spoke on music and altered cognitive states. The exact mechanisms for producing altered cognitive states in humans is still largely unknown, and he looked at fieldwork conducted in Japan, Bali, India, and North America to review current research speculation about the nature of these states. Tanya Lerman claimed that transcendence is local. She believes that spiritual experience is shaped by the brain, but also by the ways local culture invites people to pay attention to events in their minds and bodies. So she examined the way spiritual experience differs in 3 charismatic evangelical churches in the Bay Area, in Accra, in Ghana, and in Chennai, in India. And this is a strange study. Ricardo Rosenkrantz presented on reality and transformation in magic, music, and medicine, the architecture of transcendence. In the magical arts, the subtext of each performance is transcendence. And the successful magician, not musician, creates a bridge of belief into a second universe predicated on the relationships created by the magician himself or herself. But what is transcendence? Some of you might be familiar with this term and use it often. I don't use it often myself, even though people often say the music we perform is quite transcendental, which is a compliment. You might have come across it in the Johnny Depp film in 2014 called Transcendence. But personally, I believe that it is something quite undescribable and subject to personal experience. Perhaps David Aldrich says it best in his book, Music and Altered States. And he writes, "Transcendence is going beyond a current awareness to another level of understanding. That is a shift in consciousness This does not necessarily imply a conventional set of beliefs. It is based upon an innate capacity that we have as human beings to rise above the condition. Again, another theory that this thing we call transcendence is something we can all achieve. It's innate, it's in each and every one of us. So you might have read the E-Blast description, which says that I would start with the secret of the golden flower. But I've decided that I would leave that till the end and start with something else, if that's okay with you. So for now, please let the music speak to you, and perhaps you might recognize this work. Does anyone recognize the work? Yeah, I feel very famous. So the St. Matthew Passion by Bach, and it's number 6, the chorus 1 and 2. We sit down in tears and call to you. You setzen uns mit Tränen nieder. Sorry to just stop it there. And that was a performance by the Hungarian Festival Choir and the Hungarian State Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Geza Overfunk. And so, very popular Western classical piece in the canon, built on archetypes of betrayal, prophecy, love, redemption. And for those who are musicians here, the two choruses no longer are antiphonal, they sing together homophonically, stating their grief. This is at the end of the work when they say goodbye to the dead Christ. And it ends on a very uncomfortable, maybe for listeners of that time, dissonance on a major seventh. So this piece came into focus on an ABC Radio National program called Tears and Transcendence, the Spiritual Power of Music, and it came out on Saturday the 16th of March in 2013. Why is it that some music moves the spirit so powerfully? This question was at the heart of the forum, and it featured the Archbishop of Brisbane, Mark Coleridge, conductor Graham Abbott, baritone Paul Whelan, and Dr. Samantha Owens, a colleague from the University of Queensland. And the session was hosted by Martin Buzzacott, and they were joined by members of the opera and Camerata of St. John's. Graham Abbott found that after conducting this performance, he was unable to speak. It was so mesmerizing for him as the conductor. He was so absorbed by the harmonic workings, the melodies, and he found it emotionally overwhelming in an extremely personal way. He was also unable to speak after conducting the Messiah, but St. Matthew Passion was quite something else for him. Bach expert Samantha Owens talked about the Australasian symposium that she ran in Melbourne called Bach the Sublime, which examined the performance of this Passion at Sydney Conservatorium in 1943 during the middle of World War II. And she's published a paper on this topic, if you're interested. References there. After this particular performance, British music critic commentator Neville Cardis said in his review, also called Bach the Sublime, that the audience on this occasion was transfixed by the music and offered tremendous consolation in these troubled times, despite the fact that we were at war with the country of the composer. There was a lot of debate about this in the newspapers of the time, but the general opinion was that this was such amazing music that transcended any matter of time and place. And so on that occasion, Bach was truly sublime. And his music was very much transcendent, and he was a fantastic composer. And I think this is quite an enlightened general opinion in 1940s Australia. And in the same year, Vaughan Williams' Fifth Symphony premiered in London, also in the middle of the war, and it received a similar response. It was quite transcendental for listeners at the time as well. The Archbishop in this forum found that Bach writes music that you can't escape from, and it takes you into places you'd rather not go. And baritone Paul Whelan asserted that one doesn't necessarily need to have religious faith to perform this passion well. He sees the musical connection as one between yourself and the universe. And to prepare for the role of Jesus, he did immerse himself in the Gospels and thought of growing his hair a bit longer and a beard as well. But to what extent is this music filling a gap in what people seek? These days we don't hear these oratorios live anymore, not as much. Back in the 50s, the St. Matthew Passion was performed once every year, but not anymore. And you can hear it on an iPod or on your CD player, but it's just not the same as hearing it live from a singer, especially in moments where, say, in this Passion, we have the betrayal of Jesus by Peter, and the moment when the words are sung, "Come, you daughters, help me lament," and you're sitting there and it feels like you're the daughters, even though you might be a male member of the audience. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Chan Buddhism, but it's a form of Buddhism that's different to the Theravada and Mahayana traditions. And the chanting is quite different in that it's quite melodious. And unlike the monotone of earlier Indic forms, we have melodies and we also have homophony. And it's often accompanied by what's called dharma instruments, so wooden fish, which are wood blocks shaped in the shape of a fish, and bells and gongs and chimes. And the origins of this type of chant lie in legend, but it is believed that one of the Chinese princes, Prince Taozi, in the reign of Emperor Weiwu, heard a pure sound descending from the sky while traveling through Yishan, which is a sacred mountain in northeast China, and he was so taken by this experience that he tried to record it. And so the singers of Fanbai, which is the name of this type of chanting, believe they still sing it today. And it's sung by both clergy and congregation members. So let's have a listen.
Commencement of the Buddha's wedding ceremony. We now welcome the abbess of Nantian Temple, witnessing master of the wedding, parents of groom and bride, and the guests, please enter.
让我们以热烈掌声，恭请主婚人及新郎新娘入席。
Let's put our hands together for the groom and the bride and the guests. 请大众向上合掌。 Please join palm as we chant and pray.
example of homophonic chanting, which is more in harmony, which I was very surprised to find in Chinese music because often there isn't harmony in traditional Chinese music. And the nuns were just chanting the Heart Sutra, which is a very fundamental doctrine in the Mahayana Buddhist sects. You might be surprised to find something a bit more contemporary sounding in a traditional community of Buddhists. And this particular style of music is influenced a lot by evangelical Christian singing. And it is a Buddhist hymn, although the text really refers to the name of the Grand Master, whose name means stars and clouds. And so this piece of music is called Stars and Clouds. And the words are, I love a starry sky at night time. And so it doesn't really sound like a hymn in the conventional sense. But this style of composition was invented to attract younger members of the congregation and to keep them interested in the religion.
I love the starry sky at night time and the fluttering clouds of the day. Sparks, the starlight extends, the boundaries of light. Masses of clouds tell us of freedom and life. No matter what kind of night we see, no matter what kind of days we face, there'll always be stars in the sky. There will always be love.
In 2006, I was commissioned to write a composition. Actually, in fact, I won a commission to travel to New York and compose for the second Festival of International Universal Sacred Music. And so I was so struck by the music of this community that I decided to base my piece on their style of singing. And so this particular piece is called The Great Invocation, and here I draw inspiration from the chanting that you heard earlier, previous to that pop song hymn. And later in the piece, a few more interesting textures with the didgeridoo. Part of my doctoral research was to look into the role of religion in Chinese immigrants in their lives in Australia. And so I looked at that Buddhist community, and then I also found a community of Chinese Catholics who began worship here in 1954, and they brought their religion from mainland China and Hong Kong, and are still going. And so I found this really interesting example of Gregorian chant, but sinicized. So it came to Australia in Cantonese. And this is an example of music for worship. So we have music for art's sake, but here music with a ritual function. I found this very interesting because I come from a community of, I was raised in the Catholic Church, but in the old rites. And so I thought I would share with you what traditional chant sounds like, not coming from China. So. We might have to stop it there so that I can keep going. So, sacred music, in this sense, helps express, I guess, something of the divine. And I know from having studied this sort of music since I was a boy that we believe that music, to sing once is to pray twice. And so it helps people express a kind of belief, but also a little bit of the divine in what they sing, which is my personal understanding of the Sublime. I'd like to move on to a very interesting composer who's also very interested in the divine in music, and his name is Dr. Kim Cuneo. And he's a colleague of mine from the Conservatorium, and we are both very interested in India. And Kim was recently commissioned to write music for Garden Cosmos, the Royal Paintings of Jodhpur, a series of concerts, installations, and accompanying audio CD to accompany the Maharaja of Jodhpur's touring art collection, which toured Australia in 2009 and 10. He, unlike most composers interested in India, he's not actually of Indian descent, but has always been looking for ways to present Hindustani music in new and interesting ways. So I'll just share with you a little clip of what I find very divine and transcendental in his music. I was also working at the Art Gallery of New South Wales on a project called The Lost Buddhas. It was a wonderful discovery of these broken statues of the Buddha found under a sports field in China. And they were of, I think, yes, 5th century antiquity, so very old statues. And so I decided to use the opportunity to collaborate with an Indian musician, and we performed this piece of music at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, looking at the connection between China and India through Buddhism. Does it work? It's not playing today, sorry about that. So transcendence does not necessarily have to be experienced as a religious act. Here is an example of what is folk music that is quite transcendental in its nature, and performers of this music often go into a bit of a trance. This genre is called shinawi, and it is performed in Korea. Originally, it was performed in the presence of a shaman, a female shaman, but these days it's become a concert item as well. But you can probably hear the rustic and folk-like origins of this piece. In 2013, I had the pleasure of working with Tai Kuo-siang on Falling Back to Earth, and we invited Wang Xingxing to come from China to play her traditional instruments. She plays a fossilized type of folk music, and again, not specifically religious in any way or meaning to be sacred, but we found the performance extremely divine and transcendental. Without her even meaning to be, I think she just has this wonderful energy about her. Some of you might have been to this exhibition. It's a very short excerpt. We now move to a topic that interests me a lot, and it is called The Secret of the Golden Flower. And this is an 8th century alchemical text with origins in ancient Egypt and Persia, but recorded in China in the 8th century. It is apparently alchemy, but not alchemy where we transform things into gold, but the alchemy of the mind and of the body. And it involves the circulation of the light, what is known as the circulation of the light, where the person meditating focuses on a bubble of light that goes up his spine, round, down past his face and back down into his solar plexus, and then again, and then into the feet. And in order to achieve enlightenment, one practices this every day. And I was so fascinated by this idea that I decided to write a composition about it. And this was a commission by the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. And I was inspired by this particular crown from the Liao dynasty in China, where we have what is known as the secret of the golden flower, because it says in the sacred text that between the sun and the moon, which is the two eyes, there lies a field about 1 inch square, which is the secret of the golden flower, the collection of all thoughts and the essence of the soul. And so I found this so inspiring that I decided to compose a piece called The Secret of the Golden Flower, and it sounds a bit like this. When I was 15, I discovered a new instrument that would change my life forever. I started off on the piano and had a breakdown and decided to go into world music. And so I decided to focus on the erhu, which is an interesting instrument from China. It has 2 strings and a snakeskin resonator at the front. And it's of Persian origin. It traveled across to China via the Silk Road and has changed a lot since then. So I decided to write a piece for this instrument based on my research into Chan Buddhism and the religion I was brought up in. And this piece is called In Meditation. go straight to the last, which is also the conclusion. Thank you.